Truck Talk, brought to you by eTruckBiz.
Hi, everyone. Ben Wheel reminding you that this episode of Truck Talk is not endorsed, sponsored, approved, or otherwise affiliated with fedexground or any company other than eTruckBiz. Joining us today are Susan Galbraith and Gina Toby. Susan is the Director of Channel Marketing, and Gina is the Partner Relationship Manager. Today's episode is about fuel management because fuel prices are rising, which you know, and they look to be continuing to do so, which means that fraud and or misuse may also be on the rise, as well as you wanting to control your legitimate fuel consumption costs. So let me introduce our guest. Susan, please tell our listeners a little bit about your background in this business.
Sure. Thank you, Ben. Gina and I are really pleased to be here. We work for FleetCor, and we have a partnership with eTruckBiz. My background and experience here at FleetCor is supporting you as a customer of eTruckBiz with marketing materials. We're really happy to participate in this partnership, and our partnership together bring your customers the ability to help fight fuel fraud and misuse by integrating FleetCor fuel cards with the eTruckBiz solution. Today we're here to talk to you a little bit about how to prevent fuel fraud and what you might experience as a customer related to fuel card fraud and misuse. You know, over the years, fuel fraud has changed. Today we talk a lot to customers about how fuel fraud is invisible and hard to track and hard to find. We'll talk a little bit more about that today in the session. And if there was one thing that I'd like you to know about what's important about fuel fraud is that you may not know that it exists. And a lot of businesses don't realize it, but it does happen on a regular basis.
Well, we have found that to be very true in our experience as well. And speaking to our customers, they really, it has gotten, really bad by the time that they have determined that there's some fraud. And usually it's been happening a lot longer and more frequently than they initially think. They initially think they caught it right at the beginning, but unfortunately, people are good at covering their tracks. They don't find that. So tell us, Susan and Gina, what types of signals should our listeners look for to tip them off that there might be fraud and or theft issues going on?
There are three major things that you could look for that might be a tip-off that fuel fraud is happening. I will caution you to also remember, we hear this quite frequently, that it's not always about fraud and misuse. Sometimes it's about recognizing fueling patterns so that you can train drivers to be conscious of what they're doing when they're out there. But you might notice that fuel fill-ups are happening too frequently, right? An internal person might be at a fuel station, and they could have a car next to them. They could bring their wife's car, and they could be fueling their gas tank and then fueling someone's gas tank next to them. You might find that fuel card charges don't match the mileage or the tank capacity. So you might have a tank that the capacity is 23 to 50 gallons, and what you notice is in the same day, someone pumps 75 gallons. Boy, that's a tip-off. That's something's not going right. And then you might spot a charge from an odd location or a location that your drivers don't normally go to. I will tell you this quick and brief story. We did have a customer who said, hey, our drivers get to go wherever they want to. They can fuel because of the way we're fueling today. But most of the organizations that we talk to, their drivers have specific stations they go to, especially in businesses like construction where they're working on a construction site, and you'll see a pattern to them using specific fueling stations. So that's another example where you may have a situation that merits asking drivers and talking to them or figuring out a way to manage that fuel cost better.
You were saying in your experience they go to the same places, I guess, is what you're saying you find a lot of the small fleet owners do and their drivers do. How do they purchase that fuel typically? Is it like a local account? Are they credit cards? Are they fuel cards only?
I always laugh when people ask that question because, as you might imagine, not in the time of COVID, but today. Before COVID, we got together and you'd be sitting at the dinner table and I would meet someone who vehicles were a very big part of their business operations, and their response to us would be, oh my gosh, we use a business credit card. I have to take my wife to Hawaii, which it seems really funny when you hear it and you're sitting in a conversation at the dinner table, but when you're really in a business and you're trying to manage fuel costs, it's not so funny. What we find is that as a business gets beyond more than 5, 10, sometimes even 20 vehicles, it becomes exceptionally important for them to consider using a fuel card instead of using a business card, even though there are benefits to using the business credit card, which we see often. And the reason is that the business fuel card gives you the ability to track the expense for fuel. It gives you the ability to identify a specific PIN and require the driver to put an odometer reading in. It makes it simple for your business to track and report on the fuel purchases and then the mileage associated with if you're in a location where you have to do trucking in multiple states. And then just a note on some other ways that we see people purchasing fuel. Believe it or not, a very, very small portion of businesses relative to those with fleets are actually using fuel cards. Those that do use the fuel cards do manage their fuel costs better, but we see people using cash. They still use checks. They still have a corporate card that they will use and hand out to drivers and let them use that. They use house accounts. But really, in truth, there is no better way to manage fuel cost than to use a fuel card for each one of your drivers when you're fueling.
Right. I hear you. So, and I know you don't have all, the answers of why people sometimes resist. What are some of the most common reasons why small fleet owners don't use fuel cards? Is it because it's just easier not to, or do they not know that they're available, or what is the most common response you get from people who don't have fuel cards?
That's a great question, Ben, and it's most often it's that they don't know that the fuel cards exist, and they don't understand what a fuel card offers them in terms of protections or control associated with managing fuel. They really think that the only options they have are cash, check, or a business credit card. And so part of our job in working with you, and part of the reason we were so excited about being able to do this podcast, is to help your drivers and your contractors' drivers, the FedEx contractors, understand better how using a fuel card can help them manage the fuel costs in their business.
I would also like to add that I've found that the other two reasons that are most common are that if they don't think something is broken, they don't see a need to fix it. And the last reason is that people just don't like change. They think that going to a fuel card from their current fueling method of purchase is going to be difficult, but it's actually very simple and seamless to be able to transition from any method to a fuel card.
Yeah, the resistance to change is true, not just in fuel cards, but a lot of areas. You're right, overcoming that, and even if they're aware. So a lot of people aren't aware, and even if they are aware, sometimes they just don't want to, and they feel like it's not broken. That's a great point. But really, the theme of this episode is that they may think that it's not broken when in actuality it is, because fuel fraud is a hidden expense, if you will, right? There's no line on people's P&L that says, okay, we're writing off this much for fuel fraud, right? I mean, they know that it's a large expense. And yeah, in fact, after labor is probably the next largest expense, and they don't even realize that it could be reduced because of the hidden. So, ladies, tell me a little bit about, or tell our listeners, what are some ways that people can take, or maybe some steps that our listeners can take to detect and or then prevent? What are actionable steps they can take to prevent the fuel fraud? We talked about detecting earlier. Susan, you gave us some examples about the frequency and the locations and capacity. What are some actionable steps they can take to prevent the fuel fraud?
Sure. I think a lot of those relate to the use of fuel cards, and I'll start, and then I'll let Gina add some that I maybe if she thinks I have not listed enough here. But, you know, the fuel cards allow you as a business owner to require a driver to put in a PIN. We said that. But you could also set dollar amounts or a dollar limit on the fuel spend. So if you have a driver who on Wednesday is going to a specific project, you can actually put a dollar amount associated with that card for that driver. And then you can also cap the number of times in which they fuel and the number of fueling trips that they make. And then you can limit, with the FleetCor fuel cards, you can limit fuel purchases by the type of fuel that they're purchasing. So, you know, if they're purchasing regular or unleaded fuel or diesel fuel, you can identify that on the card itself. And then you can also restrict the days and times that someone fuels. And of course, we've been talking about this, you know, integrating a fuel card with the vehicle's GPS or telematics solution. Specifically, we're here to talk about the relationship that we have with eTruckBiz. In any way that you're tracking the mileage and the fuel by connecting your fuel card to the tracking of the vehicle, you're able to then match the mileage associated with that vehicle to the fueling instances and the location of that fueling instance. Gina, anything I missed?
No, I think you covered all the controls that are available with the fuel card, which makes it a lot easier to block out times where you know your fleet isn't running and a transaction would otherwise happen without those controls.
That makes sense. So even if they're going 7 days a week, like many of our customers are now, they can't say, well, they can't buy money on the, they can't buy fuel on the weekends. They still may need to fill up on the weekends, but they shouldn't be running late at night, unless they're in the line haul business, and those guys are definitely late at night. But for the majority of the contractors out there, they're P&D, and they don't need to have vehicles filling up late at night. And we've also found that a lot of drivers are in the habit of filling up in the mornings, but really that's prime time when they should be delivering, and they should do their fill-ups at night on their way back. When I say at night, late afternoon or the evening when they're returning. So I guess you could put restrictions on fueling in the morning if you really don't want your drivers fueling up in the morning when they're going off going out to start their routes.
Exactly. So if I'm a business, I'm running 7 days a week, I want my guys to fuel from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., then any transactions outside of that will not happen.
Or what if they wanted them not to fill up, anytime before, like, let's say 3 in the afternoon? I guess you could set it up to fill up. They could only fill up between 3 p.m. and 7 p.m., right?
Exactly. They set the hours. They set the days. They set the hours. To Susan's point, they can also set the number of transactions that a card can transact each day, along with limits to dollars as well as gallons.
Susan, you touched on it a little bit at the beginning, and not that we have to dive too deeply into it, but what are the most common ways that people do the misuse? Is it filling up their own vehicles? Is it friends' vehicles? Is it spouses? Is it buying items in a store, in the inside that aren't actually fuel, that people are writing off as fuel, or they're trying to pass that it's fuel? Is it non-fuel purchases?
Sure.
What have you
I think
seen
it varies
in your
by
experience?
business. We see it all at FleetCor because we deal with businesses that have vehicles as their primary means of operating a business. I think it's super common, and really Gina's had a lot more exposure to this than I have, but so I'll let her talk about it a little bit. In general, we see a lot of situations where drivers are fueling other things, whether it be another vehicle, whether it be their own personal vehicle or someone else's vehicle while they're in line. I will also say that we hear a lot, and this is one of the unique things about what FleetCor offers, and that is that we do see businesses where other things, assets within the organization do need to be fueled, and we do offer, our customers ways of being able to do that. As a customer, you're in control of the drivers and their use of the cards, and that's something that people frequently say to us, well, I don't want to limit my drivers too much because I want them to be able to fuel the front loader. So, and I know Gina can attest to this. We've been on calls together where we've been working with customers where they've said, hey, our drivers need to put more than just fuel in the vehicles. So I know that your listeners may also have that question. Gina, do you want to provide a few examples in your experience of things that you've also seen related to people fueling and us not being able to track it?
Yeah. So one example of that is your driver tops off their vehicle and they see another vehicle pull up and they offer to fill up their truck for $20 cash, right? You may end up with a purchase on your statement for $40 and your driver got $20 to fill up the car behind them.
So you do see that. It's just kind of misuse. That it's just opportunity when it prevents itself. It wasn't maybe necessarily premeditated, but it's kind of a spontaneous circumstance, right?
Well, what happens is driver or employee who has been driving for a company for years, they understand how that business operates. Does it run a tight ship or does it not run a tight ship? Can I get away with things like that? And they take advantage of those broken systems. Going back, if it's not broken, I'm not fixing it. But again, if you don't know it's broken, then that's where you can be taken advantage of as far as fuel fraud and employee misuse.
So if you don't have the controls in place and the systems and the processes, then the crimes happen because they know they can get away with it. They're not necessarily, they don't set out to commit a crime, but they know that they can, and if they need a little extra money, then sometimes people are tempted to do the wrong thing if they know that nobody will be the wiser.
Right. So along with the controls, which help eliminate and prevent those transactions from being able to happen altogether, there's also the reporting that provides businesses with more insight into what their drivers and fleet are doing.
Well, that makes sense. So let's use that as a segue. We'll get off some of the negative points of fuel fraud and get to something more positive. When you say that they can do the tracking and purchases, I don't want to make this a total sales pitch for our partnership, but we feel like that we're excited about our partnership with you guys and what we offer our customers through you as our card administrators. Can y'all talk a little bit to our listeners about the advantages of the eTruckBiz fuel management program that you think are valuable to our customers and why?
Sure. We're excited about it too. We mentioned it earlier that your customers can monitor and track fuel purchases, which is very valuable. But in addition to that, the program offers them in-network discounts unsurpassed in the country. They get the cash amount when they're pumping at a fuel station. They get 5% discount off truck maintenance and parts. FleetCor is offering a rebate, and that rebate can vary, but that's money that they can put back into their business. And then really we're assisting together your customers in figuring out and tracking the efficiency of their equipment. It makes it easier to detect efficiency. And I know that also eTruckBiz is offering a rebate, but, Ben, I'll let you talk a little bit about that.
We started in 2021 with subscription tiers, and when our clients sign up for one of the new tiers of our monthly program that they qualify then for our fuel program card, and the rebates are determined by the volume of fuel that they purchase as a company. So step one is stepping up to the new tier that we offer, and then two is is applying for the card, and it's very easy, and then based on that volume they get a rebate that at this point is twice a year. That's how we're doing our rebates. So FleetCor has a rebate, eTruck has a rebate if you're on one of the new tiers, and there are network discounts and cash price at the pump. Lots of financial incentives as well as monitoring and tracking and control incentives. Speaking of, if they are interested, if one of our listeners is interested, Gene, I think you mentioned earlier that it's really a simple process. It's not as complicated as people think, and that may be preventing some people from signing up because they think there'll be a very stringent background check or a lot of information that they don't have time or energy to produce. Can you tell our listeners a little bit, if they're interested, in how to apply, what the process is, what the steps would be?
Most definitely. So when we receive a referral from eTruckBiz, it is assigned to a sales consultant who will contact you, the listener, and consult with you about your fueling needs, your travel pattern, where you are geographically, how much you need as far as spend each month, number of vehicles, the type of fuel you purchase, and any other things that you deem as important, whether that be controls because you are more administratively sound, or, again, we also will highlight what we think are holes in your current fuel method purchase. And after we do that consulting, then the sales consultant will recommend the card product that's best for you, which typically is the MasterCard. And we submit the application, credit reviews it, and once it's approved, the sales rep will get the card set up and typically are shipped out within 7 to 10 business days. You get the cards in hand, and once we ensure that those cards are activated for you is when you can sunset the other method or the current method of purchase, just so that there's an overlap for your team to get acclimated to the new eTruckBiz card. We also have account management that helps you with the transition over the first 10 weeks. So that account manager will get you onboarded to the platform to ensure that you don't have any questions about how the fuel card's used, the statements, or anything of that nature. And you have a point of contact throughout those first 10 weeks, which is hand-holding, basically, to ensure that you're fully comfortable with the transition.
That's great. So they could have cards in hand as soon as 7 to 10 business days after the initial application, and then they'll have an account manager to help for some time after that with any kind of troubleshooting that may be necessary.
Yes, sir. So after the approval, the sales consultant will complete the final steps of getting the card set up into the vendor for printing and shipping, as well as the data waiver form for the integration, which provides us the permission to send eTruckBiz the data to provide even more enhanced reporting on top of the basic standard reporting that you'll receive from us. And just ensuring you're comfortable with navigation on our online portal and any other questions outside of the basic onboarding process.
That was insightful because I think some of our listeners may think it's a little more complex and take a little bit longer, but it sounds like it's a pretty easy process. Yes, sir. If y'all were to have any kind of parting advice, we'll go on and start wrapping this up, but if y'all have any kind of important advice for people, our listeners who are either already use fuel cards or are considering getting fleet cards now that fuel prices are rising, what would maybe the one or two most important pieces of advice be?
I always encourage anybody to compare. Just like with anything else, you always want to ensure that you're looking for what is best to benefit your business. If you're skeptical right now, just be open to a consultant going through reviewing how you currently purchase your fuel today and what we can do to improve on your fuel management practice.
Good
That's
advice.
great, Gina.
Good advice. And you, Susan?
Yeah. Yes, and I think it marries very nicely with what Gina said, and I think it's old advice, but it does apply to fuel as well. You can really only control what you measure in a business, and so the idea behind getting a fuel card and marrying it with your eTruckBiz solution and is to be able to give you that control.
Okay. Also good advice. Good advice. Any insights about the future of fuel management, where you guys are going, or where you see the business going in the coming months, next few years?
Sure. There's a lot going on in our industry. I think it's one of the reasons why we're so excited about this partnership, and we believe we're really just at the tip of the iceberg in terms of tools that are coming in the future to help customers manage fuel cost. We're exploring a lot of those technologies on our own. Most of them relate to helping customers manage what they're spending on fuel, simplifying the process of kind of tracking that fuel spend, and then expediting the process of purchasing fuel. And we look forward to leading the charge and bringing these solutions to market for your customers and for others in the market.
That's excellent. Good to hear. Appreciate y'all being on today's episode, being our guest. I think it's been very insightful for our folks who we talked about may not know their fuel, or they may have recently, this episode may catch their attention because they recently discovered they had some issues, and we've given them some advice and tips on how to prevent it or how to detect it and prevent it. And then finally about some of the more positive aspects of fuel management programs and the discounts and rebates and incentives that are available if people just understand how easy it is to apply and qualify and start saving money and protecting their business. So thank you both for your time today. I know you're busy. I'll let you get back to your real jobs, but we really enjoyed having you on today's episode.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben.
We look forward to our listeners joining us on our next episode of Truck Talk by eTruckBiz.